Okay, great. Well, I'm so excited to have with us today Dr. Olivia Anthony. Olivia is the, sorry, Olivia is the manager of science communications at Susan G. Komen. So her job is scientific communication, something that I know many of you are interested in. Before that, she did her bachelor's degree in genetic cell biology and development from the University of Minnesota. And then she got her PhD here at CU Anschutz in the cancer biology program. And then she then moved on to do a postdoc at the University of Pittsburgh before then transitioning into her role at Susan G. Komen. So we are very excited to hear more about your job, Olivia, and how you got into science communication. So I will let you take it from here. Oh, but sorry, I muted everyone when they all came in. So I think I muted
And
you.
I'm on mute. Okay, there we go. And let me know if my slides look funny. I was telling Hannah that I'm using a new program that I'm not familiar with, so we're just gonna try our best here.
Yeah, they
But
look great.
thank you so much for the introduction. I'm so excited to speak with you all today and to tell you about my career and how I got here. So, yeah, my talk title is Jumping at the Opportunity, Transitioning from Academia to Nonprofit Scientific Communications. So, a little bit of an outline for the presentation today. I'll tell you about my career path and kind of the things that have led me to all the different directions. Go over my life as a manager of scientific communications, and then end with some lingering advice for anyone interested in this field. So, starting with my background, Hannah already gave you a little bit of an overview, but I got my bachelor's degree at the University of Minnesota. And when I started college, I was definitely knew I was interested in the health sciences and biological sciences. So, when I started, I was kind of looking into different health science professions. And kind of at the time, medical school seemed like what I was most interested in. And I had an opportunity to start doing research in a lab that studied pancreatic cancer. I kind of got into it thinking that this would be great to put on a medical school application. And I ended up really, really enjoying it. I thought I would get into the lab, or I thought I would be used mostly as like a dishwasher or someone to just make solutions, but I was actually paired with a really, really awesome mentor who had me doing experiments really from day one. And she taught me pretty much all the lab techniques that I have used throughout my scientific career. Um, but it was definitely something that really got me interested in research. But I was still kind of thinking medical school since I typically like to really follow through on what I set out to do. And I opted after I graduated to stay in that same pancreatic cancer lab as a junior scientist, which is what we called in Colorado a PRA type thing. So I was planning to spend this time to work on my medical school applications. I went through one round of medical school applications and had an interview, but no success. I really didn't put a lot of time and effort into other types of medical school preparation. As it turned out, I had a pretty big fear of needles and just in general, doing some of that more like direct patient care stuff um, ended up taking a lot of time away from research, which is something that I really enjoyed. So I was friends with a bunch of graduate students in my time in the lab. And so I kind of saw what they were doing and thought it seemed like a really interesting path to take. So I ended up applying for graduate school during my second year as a junior scientist. But and during my time as a junior scientist, besides learning, I learned all the techniques already while I was in getting my degree, but now I was in the point of publishing papers and doing presentations. I got to go to conferences. So really kind of solidified that I really liked this path. This led me to attending graduate school at Anschutz. I was in the cancer biology program and I was in Carol Sartorius's lab. and my project was focused on breast cancer stem cells. I had gained an interest in this in my time in Minnesota, so I was really excited to find a lab that was working on it um, in Colorado. And this also got me into the breast cancer space. I wasn't really sure what, kind of cancer I'd focus on in grad school, but I ended up in the breast cancer field and ended up really, really loving it and loving the community. Very tight knit. I mean, it's a big community, but it's really tight knit. And I'd already made so many connections going to conferences and stuff. So um, after graduating, I knew I wanted to stay in the breast cancer field. So just kind of through my connections, I ended up at the University of Pittsburgh. So someone on my thesis committee had actually done their postdoc in my postdoc lab and really very highly recommended. Um, Lab has a really wonderful reputation, which is well deserved. And so I ended up at University of Pittsburgh for my postdoc in 2021. There, I continued to work on breast cancer, this time a little bit different kind of breast cancer that's called invasive lobular breast cancer. I was really interested in this topic because it's kind of a less studied form of breast cancer. So it's a really great project to work on, and I started working more on metastasis. And then I started my role at Susan G. Komen in 2022 as scientific communications manager, and recently was promoted to manager of scientific communications. I know these sound the same, but they are apparently a little bit different. And so next, I kind of wanted to go through like, how did I actually get there? So kind of going through some of the decisions and things that were going on during that time. Oh, and from the last slide, I was going to leave off the years to avoid aging myself, but then I realized that the years were actually very relevant to kind of what has got me here today, mostly because of COVID and sort of the aftermath of COVID. So I'll talk a little bit about that now. But during my time at Anschutz is when I really discovered what I love to do. So at Anschutz, I had obviously a lot more opportunities to do some grant writing, do a lot more presentations, and I realized I really liked helping others with their writing and presentations. So, like, we had a grant writing class in my grad program that it was a really, really hard work, but I ended up really loving it to the point where I would focus more on that rather than my like lab rotations. And I was also invited to be a teaching assistant for that class the next year. So that gave me the opportunity to help others with their writing and their grants. And I really love doing that part of science. And then I also had like a F-31. So really the writing stuff is what really interested me the most. And I also discovered what I didn't love. So I really shortly after I even started grad school, it was very clear that I was not a big fan of bench work, but I kept up with the bench work because I had to do the bench work to get the data to analyze, to actually write the grants and do the presentations to give you something to talk about. But I definitely did not love working at the bench. And it's something that I realized very early on. And of course, that was after already 4 years doing bench work in Minnesota as well. So just something that got a little old for me. But so thinking about what I loved and what I didn't love, I really did think that perhaps the PI route would be a good route for me because just the PIs I worked with, they did a lot of grant writing, they gave a lot of presentations, they did a lot of mentoring, and they spent a lot of time at their desks, so not much bench work. So I did decide, okay, I'm going to at least pursue this PI route to see how it goes. So get the postdoc, see how the postdoc goes, and write all the grants to try to land that tenure track position. that was kind of the plan at the end of my grad school career. But at the same time, I knew I loved the scientific writing part of grad school. And there was one person I met through that grant writing class that I took in grad school. She had what I thought was such a cool job. She was employed by one department at Anschutz and she was basically in charge of writing the different grants for these different PIs within the department. And I thought that just seemed like such a cool job. So in my mind, I thought that would be um, kind of a cool or a good backup career to have in mind. And I knew that going in academia, you definitely need to have some sort of backup in mind just because the odds of getting one of these positions is they're pretty low. So I used LinkedIn to have a like an ongoing search of scientific writing positions. And I think I set this up, I mean, pretty early on in my grad school career. So it would give me notifications of different jobs that are related to scientific writing. And they would just give me like weekly emails about these different jobs. So I would just look at those to see what's out there. Um, so yeah, but anyways, then I continued on to my postdoc at the University of Pittsburgh. And one of the really cool things about University of Pittsburgh and their program is that they had all postdocs there fill out a career development plan and discuss it with your PI. So this was like a required document. You had to have this discussion pretty early on after you started your postdoc, and you had to talk about your career plans, kind of your big goals and milestones for how you want to get there. And it had a section where you would talk about like alternative plans as well. So upfront, kind of discussed with my mentors that yes, I wanted to pursue this independent lab route. So I wanted to write like the K99, an F32. I wanted to attend conferences and stuff. But I also did mention that I do have sort of a backup plan. I would love to get into some sort of scientific writing, really as my backup. And even right away, they recommended some people that I could reach out to just to kind of build my network and learn more about these types of jobs. So my mentors were definitely very aware of that and supportive of me having like a backup plan. And they also, I think, gave me some projects that helped me in this with this route. So like one of the projects that I was working on was writing a review, which I had never done before. So I thought that was a great way to like keep building my writing experience. So while I was in my postdoc, things were overall going really well. I had really, really great mentors, really great project that I was really interested in. I also had an institutional fellowship that gave me a salary bump, which was really nice. But at the same time, there was a lot of other things going on in the world that kind of made me reconsider what I thought I wanted to do. So first, there was all this aftermath with COVID. I had some conferences that I was planning to attend at in my postdoc that were canceled because of COVID. So that was a big bummer. And then this was also kind of the time when we were seeing like skyrocketing gas prices and inflation. It really kind of made me nervous about just where things were at, like finance wise. One thing I was in charge of as a postdoc was kind of maintaining our cell culture supplies and things like that. And I could just see the prices of those things just skyrocketing as I was placing orders. And I thought, oh wow, these things are going up so fast, but I don't think like funding is going up along with it. So it just really made me nervous about the stability and job security of a PI. And then I'm also the breadwinner of my family. So like having the PhD gives me like like a high earning potential. And that was pretty clear while looking at LinkedIn because around this time, there was, I feel like, a shift in salary transparency. So I was able to see the salary transparency or salaries on LinkedIn posted on these different jobs that I feel like weren't there before. But I was like, wow, you can actually make pretty good money in some of these industry jobs and writing jobs, which I thought was really cool. And then work-life balance was also kind of challenging for me because I also had my first baby in my postdoc. And kind of at that time, me and my husband were working opposite days to avoid sending my baby to daycare. So he would work weekends and I would work during the week. So we weren't really seeing each other that much. And it also meant that I couldn't do any work on the weekends. And I was working constantly on weekends pre-baby to really keep up in the lab with everything I needed to be doing. So that was altogether, these things kind of tipped the balance to really start me to get me to look around and seriously consider some other things out there. So I started looking a lot more at LinkedIn. And one day I did see a job posting from Susan G. Komen, and the job description was a scientific communications manager. It required someone that had a PhD, publication history in breast cancer. And I didn't know a whole lot about what the rest of the job description meant. There was definitely a lot of writing involved, but all in all, it just looked like something that would be the perfect fit for me. So I had done a few like LinkedIn easy applies up until that point, just to you know, try to get my foot in the door at other jobs, but nothing had really like sparked my interest where I was going to actually sit down and do the whole application. Because at this point, I was about like partway through my postdoc. I had a project like under development, almost going to start working on, putting a manuscript together. So I wasn't even planning to transition at that time, but seeing this job description for Komen pop up, it just seemed kind of like it was meant to be. So I ended up sitting down and doing the entire application and actually putting some work into it. And shortly thereafter, I got an interview with their HR. So it's just kind of like a basic intake interview, followed up with a panel interview, which consisted of my current supervisor and then one other person on my team. Then I moved forward with an interview with the vice president of our division. They asked me then for some references and writing samples. And then they then gave me the job offer. And even up until this point, before I got the job offer, I wasn't even entirely sure if I was going to actually make that jump to something new and leave academia altogether. But once they kind of gave me the offer letter and with the salary, I said, okay, I really can't pass this up. And so this whole process, I think it was somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks, but I remember it felt very fast. And that is actually one of the goals at Komen, is to get people through this process very quickly. But so yeah, that is how I ended up transitioning from academia to my current position. So I then wanted to talk a little bit about the big things that I leaned on during the application process. First is projects I've worked on with the team. I vividly remember that this is something that they asked a lot about, is kind of walking through projects I've worked on as a team. And I can see why, because everything we work on now, it is definitely done with a team. Uh, and this was probably one of the harder questions because in academia, everything is so you do a lot of things independent. You work on everything start to finish by yourself, and things are not quite like that in my organization. But and I wasn't sure how I'd feel about it, but it turns out I actually really, really like this way of working because it relies on everyone has a little bit of different expertise that they bring to the table, and everything turns out better. The other thing I lean on is my passion for communicating science. So I always opened up um, with the kind of statement that my favorite part about science is doing the writing and the presentations. And I think that went over pretty well during the interviews. Um, my breast cancer experience, of course, was a huge help because I'll talk about this in the next slide, but Susan G. Komen is a breast cancer nonprofit. So having that breast cancer experience, I think, gave me a huge leg up. Um, I had done some freelance blogging. So actually my brother was trying to start up a new business and I had offered to help him by writing some of the blogs on his website. They were like mental health based. So it was just kind of like a fun project that I was doing on the side to help. And I actually told my brother that, hey, I kind of want to just like have this portfolio in my back pocket in case I end up like transitioning fields one day. So I did end up sending these as writing samples. And so I think that did help. A few things in my grad school experience that I referenced. I participated in a 3-minute thesis competition, and I think I placed third in that competition. So I talked about that. And then I also served as chair of our retreat planning committee during the year that our year planned our cancer biology retreat. So talked about that as like a leadership experience and a way of working in a team. And then during my postdoc, I also got a lot of great experience that kind of helped me talk about this stuff in the interview. So my postdoc mentors, they always worked very closely with patient advocates on their grants. So I worked one-on-one with a patient advocate on some of my grants that I wrote. So this was like writing lay summaries and actually talking with patient advocates about what the problems we're trying to solve with our research. So that was great experience. And then I also got to do some presentations to patient advocates. And then I also did a lot of mentoring of students. And then I got to teach a few grad classes there in Pittsburgh. So that was a good way to kind of frame how this is one way that you can explain scientific concepts. And then I threw this picture in here because I think just landing this job was also just a lot of luck. I know I talked to my supervisor about this once, and I don't remember the numbers, but I was pretty astonished about how many applications that they received for this position. I think it might have been like 80 or something. I think they interviewed about 4 to 6 people. So I truly do feel very lucky to have found this because I know a lot of people they embark on this like long job search, but that wasn't me. And so I feel like my situation was a little bit abnormal. And we actually just recently hired another scientific communications manager. Um, and they had the exact same job description, although we were, just to give you a little bit of insight, um, not necessarily looking for someone just like me. So this person that we ended up hiring didn't have breast cancer background, but she had a lot of experience communicating science via a lot of different channels, which I'll talk more about. But that's something that we are doing kind of in my little team right now. So this is all to say that these different positions, like they're looking for something pretty specific and like trying to find the way that you're going to fit their team the best and kind of like fill the gaps with what they have. Oh, and then last but definitely not least was my network. So I definitely lean on my both postdoc and grad school networks for the interview process. So like I said, they asked for references. So I got my grad school PI as a reference, and then two former lab members that I asked for references. And then someone from my postdoc lab gave me a reference. And then also the lab I worked in as a postdoc, those two PIs, they were actually a really long time Komen grantees. So um, I think a little bit of name recognition there probably worked in my favor as well. All right, so a little bit more about what Susan G. Komen is. So it's a nonprofit organization for breast cancer. Our mission is to save lives by meeting the most critical needs in our communities and investing in breakthrough research to prevent and cure breast cancer. And so we do this in several different ways. So we do fund breast cancer research directly, but we also provide patient services. We do some advocacy to try to uh, instill change at a federal and state level, and then also provide education, which is really my where I fit in. And in general, nonprofits have two sides. This is something I didn't know about until I got into the nonprofit world, but there's the development side. So there's a whole team whose job it is to raise the money. And then the mission side is the team who uses that money to carry out the mission. And so this is where my team falls. And so just to give you a little bit of insight as to my responsibilities, right now I lead two revenue generating patient education programs. So one of these is a video series. It's a like a bi-monthly video series, and the goal is to communicate the latest, like what's coming next for breast cancer patients, like what new research is on the way that is actually going to impact them. And so I interview experts in the field and then put together these videos about different topics every other month. And then the other series is a blog series that is more geared towards newly diagnosed breast cancer patients so that um, the series serves as a way to kind of like guide people to our vast array of resources that we have on our websites, so that people are empowered to make the best decisions they can for their breast cancer care. Um, and so when I say to revenue generating patient education programs, we partner with industry and other nonprofit organizations to carry out these education programs. And that's one of the ways that Komen raises money to carry out our mission. And then another big project I have ongoing is kind of coming up with a strategy to revitalize our YouTube channel. And this is mostly because through these programs, we are creating a lot of new video content. And so trying to figure out a way to best organize our channel so that people can find all this great information that we're creating. Another big part of my job is monitoring the breast cancer landscape. So we like to keep an eye on everything that's going on in breast cancer so that we can make sure we're able to answer the questions of patients who come to us to search for answers about breast cancer. And so, what this looks like is the big thing that I do is keep an eye on the big clinical trials that are coming up in breast cancer. I actually have a big spreadsheet that I use to keep track of different companies' clinical trials. And that also feeds into the strategy for working with partners for some of our patient education programs. And the other thing is I also monitor social media. I follow a lot of the big clinical trialists and thought leaders in the breast cancer space, just to keep an eye on what's out there, what are people talking about, and what are patients concerned about, all those kind of things. I also do a lot of drafting of talking points and reports for leadership. So, for example, if some of our senior leadership is attending an advisory board, or if they have like a PR opportunity, maybe they have a news interview, I'll help with drafting talking points about that. Or sometimes they'll say, I guess a good example is um, young women and breast cancer. That's a really big topic lately because recent studies have found that breast cancer is being diagnosed in people that are younger and younger. So that's a really hot topic for us now, something we want to um, take a stance on as an organization. So they might say, hey, can you give us some of the facts about this? And um, kind of write that up as a report for them as they're speaking. I also weigh in on partnership opportunities with pharmaceutical companies. So this kind of gets back to the patient education programs. So our development team will come to us with different potential partners that we might want to work with. And one of my jobs is to kind of see what they're working on and how their work kind of aligns with the educational goals that we have at Komen and what we think patients need to know about. Finally, I create communications plans for some of the major breast cancer meetings. So one is the ASCO meeting, American Society for Clinical Oncology, and SABCS, the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium. It's good timing because ASCO is actually next week, so I'm right in the thick of it right now. But one of the things that we like to, or we try to do is kind of have a big social media presence for these conferences to position Komen as a big thought leader and trusted source during like in the breast cancer space. So I come up with a communications plan for these meetings. So that is like going through the program, identifying some of the biggest, most impactful presentations that are going to be presented. And then we carry out this plan, which consists of live tweeting, highlighting any of our Komen grantees, doing social posts, writing blogs on some of the big announcements at these meetings. And so I actually did get to attend SABCS in 2023, which was really fun because I got to see some of my coworkers in person. And then I also got to see old friends from both my postdoc and grad schools. That was really fun experience. And I'll probably be going to these more in the future as well. Oh, and then also now, since I got the promotion, I also now supervise one direct report. So that new scientific communications manager that we hired, she is now my direct report. So that has been like a great learning experience for me as well. Something still new to me, but an experience that I've been wanting to gain. So really happy I've gotten this opportunity. All right, so a little bit more about my day to day. A lot of my time is spent creating content, mostly for those two programs. Um, so the video series is still my direct responsibility, but that blog series that I mentioned is now my direct reports responsibility. So I create the content for the video series, which is writing, doing interviews. I also do some presentation making, putting videos together. And then I review content, so that blog content that I talked about. And then another big part is coordinating the review of all this content, and also coordinating the promotion with some of the external teams at Komen. So we work really closely with our marketing team because they help us actually get this content we create out into the public domain so that it can be found, and they kind of help us polish that up. And we use this project management software called Asana that helps us work closely with other external teams. But it's a really great software to use and makes working as a team a lot more a lot easier. And as far as meetings go, I typically have 0 to 4 meetings per day. I'd probably average about 2 meetings a day, I'd say. So definitely, I'm not sitting in meetings all day long. But this consists of like one-on-one meetings with my supervisor and then meetings with my direct report. We have some team meetings. We also have cross-functional meetings, so meetings with like the marketing team, for example, or the development team. And then also a lot of external meetings with our partners. So when we work with some of our sponsored patient education programs, we meet externally with our partners to discuss our shared educational goals. Um, but that is about it for my meetings and day to day. And then I thought I'd give you some examples of just like miscellaneous tasks that I've gotten as a scientific communications manager at Komen. Because besides the day to day, I also regularly have usually some other tasks that I'm working on. So one example is like, okay, our leadership is meeting with Novartis to discuss clinical trial results. So can you put together talking points on the Natalie trial? So this is one of the clinical trials that's been, I'd say last year was pretty hot in the news. A potential partner is interested in patient education about ESR1 mutations. So can you offer some ideas for potential blog topics? This is something I do a lot of, is just kind of strategizing what these different companies or organizations work on and how what it would be the best way to talk about these things. We awarded 25 new research grants this year. Can you write up short, lay-friendly summaries of these grants? So just writing up different summaries. These are used throughout the year for either content creation or news or giving information to donors, things of that nature. Menopause is the hot topic right now. Can you pull together talking points on menopause that we can use at ASCO? So this is just a recent task that I've been assigned this past week. I have an interview with Health Central about HER2 low breast cancer. Can you provide some talking points for these interview questions? So this was my direct supervisor. She had an interview and she asked me to come up with some talking points for these interview questions. Then I thought I'd talk a little bit more about writing for a lay audience and just the content that I typically produce. So I've already talked about the blogs and videos. Videos is something that we're really trying to build up our video library on breast cancer education. And we're doing all sorts of different formats. So we're doing interviews. I have a short series of little short graphic videos that I've started on just very basic breast cancer topics. So those have been pretty fun to put together. We do social media posts, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Those are kind of our main channels that we post to. I also make a lot of educational material for our staff to kind of help them with anything they need, especially our development team who is working directly with industry partners to kind of help them in their conversations. So, for example, last week, I gave a presentation about all the top things to watch for at the ASCO conference, which is next week, so that they're kind of prepared and in the know about what's going on in breast cancer and what was being presented at the meeting. Also handouts to accompany these presentations, so kind of like cheat sheets of breast cancer terminology that they might encounter, things like that. And then also reports and talking points, which I already kind of talked about. And all of the writing that I do, I was thinking about this, and I think it is entirely writing meant for a lay audience. So whether that be the material for staff or the patient-facing education, I don't do any technical writing in this position. And I've definitely, this is still something I'm working on writing for lay audience, but one of the things that's helped me the most is tapping into my teammates. 'Cause we have people from, one of the things I've loved about this position is working with people who come from all sorts of different backgrounds. And on my team, we have a very diverse team. So I work with a technical writer. She got her degree in technical writing, and she actually worked for NASA doing some writing for them. So she's really great at blog writing, and she doesn't have a breast cancer background, so it's actually great. She's a great person to bounce like my writing off of. So I'll always pass things by her to um, take a read through to make sure everything is readable and understandable to a lay person. So having these teammates with different backgrounds has been a huge help and helped me perfect my lay audience writing. All right, and then talking a little bit about career trajectory options from in this kind of position. So as I mentioned, I was promoted this year, and so what's different is I now have a direct report, and I'd say a little bit more decision-making ability since I'm now doing more of the review and signing off on content. So I've really enjoyed that. And also I've been looking to build management experience. Um, I do still keep an eye on LinkedIn because I feel like you always just have to see what's out there. And it seems like a lot of these more senior scientific communications roles, they do ask for management experience in your background. So that was one thing I was hoping to get at Komen, and I'm glad that I'm getting it now. And I'm also in the future hoping to play a bigger role in strategic decisions. So, like, kind of just coming up with new patient education programs. That's kind of something that I'm excited to hopefully do more of in the future. I'm working on a new one right now. And just in general, being more involved in the strategy behind decision making in the patient education space. Um, and then I thought I would talk about some of the other roles in our organization that has PhDs because there's a lot of people at Komen who also have PhDs but do different things. So, starting with my boss and my boss's boss, so the director and vice president, they are very similar to me. So they both have PhDs in cancer-related backgrounds. Um, so I just kind of wanted to include this to show that they've kind of worked their way up within the organization. I think as needs change, that's kind of one thing with nonprofits is there's a lot of change that happens, and because they are just like adapting to meet the needs of the organization. Um, and then next is research grants manager. So like I said, we directly fund, excuse me, we directly fund breast cancer research. And so our research grants managers, they coordinate like the peer review process, they communicate with grantees, basically just manage progress reports, things like that. We also have scientific programs managers. So these people kind of do what I would think of as like special projects in breast cancer space. I guess to give you one really cool example of something they're working on, there's kind of a need noticed with a certain type of breast cancer called inflammatory breast cancer that has very strange symptoms and is often misdiagnosed. So on the scientific programs team, they convened a group of experts to come up with this new tool to help healthcare providers better recognize this rare type of breast cancer. And it's kind of gone through all these iterations, and it's now worked its way up that it's been validated in the research. So just some like they work on those kind of cool initiatives like that, trying to fill gaps in what's needed for patients. We also have a really another cool initiative going on called Share for Cures. So at Komen, we're building our own research registry. So we're trying to recruit as many people with breast cancer that we can to have them share their data so that they can contribute to breast cancer research. So the goal is that we're going to be able to share this registry with the research community, but also be able to do some of our own in-house research. So that is where some of our PhDs will come in there as well. We also have a branch of program evaluation. A lot of the staff there has PhDs. So they work to measure the impact of all of our different programs to ensure that we're actually making an impact on the breast cancer community. So they like run the metrics, they keep track of everything we're doing. So kind of just taking the data into account to make sure we're making an impact. So that is all the things in the nonprofit sector, but I have seen a lot of scientific communications roles advertised on LinkedIn in the for-profit sector, like at pharmaceutical companies. I don't know a lot about them. I imagine that they probably your primary jobs are working on manuscripts and like conference posters, things of that nature. But something I've been interested in learning more about, but I don't know much about at the time or for right now. Um, but I've also learned that the like uh, pharma companies, they also have patient advocacy teams that we work closely with when we are communicating with partners. And I've always thought that would be kind of an interesting kind of thing that you could transition into from what I'm doing right now. So talking a little bit more about pros and cons of this position. Pros are that I am really doing what I love and without what I don't love. So I cannot say I miss the bench at all. I still feel like I'm doing a lot of what I love about science, which has been so great. So just all the writing, like I really thrive when I'm working on primarily writing. I have a work-life balance that I would say is unmatched right now. So Komen is a fully remote company. So I work from home 100% of the time. We have a 7.5 hour workday, so not a full 8 hour workday. I don't do any work on weekends, with the exception of conference season, so ASCO. Sometimes I have to watch talks on the weekend, but that is quite literally the only work on weekends I do. And then my supervisor tells me I can take that time back during the week. We also just got an unlimited PTO policy instituted. So very new, but yeah, we're encouraged to take PTO whenever we need it, essentially. Um, I would also say that the compensation is definitely fair. In the nonprofit world, you're probably not going to be making as much as you would in industry. But my husband and I both agree that the fact that I'm fully remote is worth a pretty good bit of money. But just to give you a little like idea into salary, when I was, because Komen is one of the companies that they do post their salary on all their job descriptions. So I think my role was advertised at like 65 to 80 when I was being hired. And then they actually offered me like at the very top end of the range that they advertised. Oh, and that was far above my postdoc salary. And that was with, as I said, I had a bump in my postdoc salary with the grant that I had. So to me, it was kind of a no-brainer. I have a really, really great manager and coworkers, which has been wonderful. And then a lot of variety in my day to day. I work on so many different tasks. No day is the same. And I still get to do a lot of learning. So, like when I'm coming up with these reports or talking points, I am still learning about new things every day. So that really doesn't get old. Finally, a frequent sense of accomplishment. One thing I really like about this job is I am able to like check a lot of things off my to-do list easy peasy. I feel like academia, you're kind of working on the same thing for like weeks at a time, and it's really hard to like have milestones that give you a sense of accomplishment. But I really like that here. It's like, oh, I did 2 blogs last month. I got this video published. It's all that. And it's all very recognized too. So we have a performance review process that we go through every year where you can actually list every single little thing you did and you kind of feel like you're getting credit for it. So that's just one thing that I've liked about this job. Cons, there's not too many of them. One is that I rarely get to see my colleagues in person, which is kind of a bummer because, like I said, I have really great coworkers. And that is kind of one thing I miss about lab life is being able to just like go out for a little happy hour on a Friday. That was always really fun. So I do miss that. Um, Sometimes our company processes can be kind of slow. So we have like a very thorough review process. So you have to take all that into account when you're thinking about your deadlines and when you need to get things accomplished by. Um, so sometimes that feels a little bit slow. And then, kind of similarly, overcoming silos. So it's hard for me to say since this is my first position after outside of academia. And so I don't know if it's like a company thing or a remote thing, but sometimes it's hard to understand what other teams are doing and um, try not to like do the same things they are. So just kind of keeping track of what's going on in the company at large sometimes can be a challenge. So now the question of am I still using my PhD? I would say definitely yes. Um, my breast cancer background has been extremely helpful in helping me uh, get off to a really great start at my job. That's just like one less thing I didn't really have to worry about learning when I started. Um, so all those years I spent working in the lab in breast cancer have paid off. And, but really, even more important than that is just the ability to problem solve and learn new things is such a valuable skill that I don't think you even really realize you're getting as you're getting your PhD. But I have had to learn a lot of new things and solve new problems, but I've always felt equipped to be able to do that just because I've had that experience as a PhD student. So I've actually had to learn a lot about clinical trials since I started. So I was obviously a basic scientist prior to this role, but um, we talk a lot about clinical trials now because those are the things that are coming next for patients. So that's what patients really are interested in knowing about. So I've had to learn a lot about the ins and outs of clinical trials, but I've actually enjoyed that a lot more than I thought I would. I've learned a lot about social media and marketing, which has been really fascinating because there's really no point in creating this content unless we know how to get it out there and get it in front of the people who need it. And then finally, video creation. I have never made videos before in my life. I don't even really watch a lot of videos on social media or YouTube or anything, but that has been like a new thing that I've been doing, but it's been kind of fun to learn along the way. Finally, the presentation and writing skills I gained during my PhD have been super helpful. I still actually present a lot um, in meetings and just and formal presentations. So, and then obviously we do a lot of writing as a PhD student. So, all very helpful. And then, of course, a lot of people always ask, is a postdoc necessary for this kind of thing? I would say no, a postdoc is not necessary. However, I don't think I would have been able to land this job without my postdoc because I got such great communications experience during my postdoc that I didn't really get in grad school. So for me, having that little extra experience was necessary. All right, so just a little other lingering advice I have. If you're interested in a field like this, I'd say my biggest piece of advice is to build a portfolio of any sort of communication that's beyond academia. So unfortunately, I don't think they cared too much about all my publications I had in grad school and my grants and things like that. But they, like I said, I think they're interested in like my presentations to patients and my blog writing. So if you have any sort of portfolio built up from just like your personal accounts, or you create some new account to do some sort of scientific communication, that would be very helpful. Um, Also, take advantage of any opportunities you have to explain science, whether that be through mentoring, teaching, or working with patients. Definitely lean on your network and just making sure to leave a good impression wherever you go, because you may need to reach out for help in the future. And definitely stay abreast on what's out there. Keep an eye on LinkedIn, just to see what's out there, what kind of skills they're looking for. That's definitely paid off for me. Even if you're not in a position of saying, oh, yeah, I want, or I'm looking to leave my job now, you never know what opportunity is going to come out at you. So, and don't be afraid to jump on it and trust your gut. And I'm certainly happy that I did. So yeah, that is all I have. So I am happy to answer any questions if there are any.
You guys are welcome to drop questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, whatever you are comfortable with. I feel like I had a question and then I forgot what it was. I should have written it down. So you talked a lot about you're doing a lot of work with like this project management software, or you're thinking about like communication strategies and things that are very much different than what you might do in a lab setting. So that's a lot of new skills that you got to learn, which is really exciting. But when you started the position, did they obviously like train you on that? Like, what did that process look like to get you up to speed on how to do that part of your job that was not sort of the scientific background that you had?
That's a really good question. I would say I did not get a lot of formal training, but I just had my supervisor was really great at easing me into the role. So I had plenty of time on my hands to just kind of figure it out. And that's kind of where it goes back to the like, you have the skills from your PhD to be able to solve those problems. Like, you will figure it out. So it was really just a lot of trial and error, but nothing has felt like as difficult as some of the problems I faced in my PhD. So yeah.
It's real. It looks like we have a question in the chat. It's how do you think AI might impact the field of science communication moving forward? It's a good question.
That is a really good question. I know at Common right now, like they've addressed AI, and we're not allowed to use AI for anything like that, like any of our writing. But I could definitely see that happening in the future. I don't really know how it's going to impact the field. I feel like a lot of companies still want to have that human touch of getting stories out there. So I don't think AI is coming for the jobs yet, but um, something to think about.
This is a good one. How did you talk about transitioning away from academia and bench work in your interview? I'm assuming this would be the interview with Komen.
Yeah, I think that's probably what that means. Yeah, so basically they did ask me like why, like what makes you interested in this kind of job? And what I told them was that um my favorite parts of the job of science are is doing the writing and doing the presentations, and I want to do that full time. And I think that struck a chord with them. So that's really how I talked about that. And I think elaborating on that with all the kind of additional experience that I've done in that space kind of helped seal the deal.
I like that you brought this up multiple times in your presentation, but we say this a lot in the career development office that reflecting on the parts of your job that you really love and like the things also within your personality that kind of align with different types of jobs. Like you mentioned, being able to have that sense of accomplishment. That's like a very specific thing that you get in some types of jobs and maybe not others. And sort of having that self-awareness is so important when you're thinking about the next step in your career. Because as a PhD, you're qualified to do lots of things. But the question is like, what are you actually going to like doing?
Yeah, it's so hard. You just don't know because it feels like it's going to be so different when you leave the lab, and it is, but it can be good too.
Hope we have another question in the chat. It's what parts of your job are most meaningful for you?
Ooh, that is a good question. So I do a lot of I have the opportunity to interview patients pretty frequently through some of our patient education programs because we like to include the perspective of patients. And so anytime I get to do that is great because it really puts in a perspective of the work that we do and why it matters and why patients need to be as educated as they can when it comes to their care. So that's always very rewarding. Um, Trying to think if there's anything else. No, I think that would be the most meaningful thing.
Hi there, Olivia. Thanks for presenting. I'm a slow typer, so I thought, okay, let's just ask. I'm to tag along to the earlier question about, transitioning away, but having it done at the interview stage. What about before the interview stage? Because, most of our academic achievements, experiences, kind of like better to be tailored in like a CV form, but I'm sure a nonprofit organization actually, look at resume instead of CV. And I'm just curious, how did you craft your resume in order to even, pass their screening and hence getting that interview? I think that's something that I've been always been curious about for folks who have transitioned over to non-academic position.
I am glad you asked that question because I went to the CV and resume workshop at Anschutz and I followed the exact same template that was presented there for the resume. So it was breaking your experience up into three parts: leadership experience, communications experience, and technical experience. So I definitely remembered that workshop and I was able to pretty quickly put that together. I don't even think I really had a resume on hand when I went to apply for this job, but I used that resource. And I think that's a great way to really think about how your experience in those jobs, how you can transform that to the position you're looking for. So kudos to Bruce's workshop. Definitely made a difference.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's very informative. Thanks.
All right, we got another in the chat. How do you think funding issues currently affecting academia will impact nonprofits? Is funding in nonprofits also uncertain?
That is a great question, and I think it's might be different from nonprofit to nonprofit. As far as I know, I'm pretty sure that Komen does not receive federal funding, so um, I don't think we have as much to worry about. But it is something that we are worried about as an organization because we support a lot of federally funded researchers, and um, so so yeah, I don't think we're as worried about funding for our organization. But and then there is a question about, are people going to, like, how are donors going to react to that? Um, so knowing that there's not much, or that there's limits to federal funding now, will people be more inclined to donate money to nonprofits to kind of make up that gap? That's something that we're not sure about. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it is definitely top of mind at our organization right now of kind of things that we're watching.
Oh, there was a follow-up from there. Did you try to negotiate your salary? Is that common or uncommon in nonprofits?
I did not negotiate my salary. I probably should have. Not because I don't think I was paid enough, but just because I think it's just a good thing to do in general. But I can't say for sure if it's common or uncommon in nonprofits, but it does seem to, at least in our organization, seems to operate pretty similarly to a for-profit org. So I think there would be nothing wrong with trying to negotiate a salary there. But I was like so satisfied with it after coming from the postdoc that I didn't really care.
Right, another one. As a fully remote worker, did anything about cost of living where you live come into play with salary ranges offered? Oh, that's a good question.
Oh, that is a really good question. I actually don't know if my where I lived impacted the salary that I was offered, to be honest. I suspect it could have. But I was in Pittsburgh, which is actually a pretty low cost of living area. So I suspect that it was not a big player into the salary range offered.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, then we can go ahead and wrap things up. So, Olivia, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And you did mention LinkedIn multiple times, so I would encourage everyone to maybe connect with Olivia and send a thank you and just make that connection if science communication is something you were thinking of in the future. All
Yeah,
right.
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.